All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you can hear us, you can see the screen, and we will get going. So my name is Beth Cohen-King. I'm the Marketing Director at Margolis & Bloom and the moderator for today. We're really excited. We have a guest. It's our first guest on the webinar. So today we're going to be doing an overview and a Q&A of the 25 documents. I know that sounds like a lot, that you need in place in order to protect yourself and your family. So planning ahead so others don't have to pick up the pieces. Sarah Hartline, Senior Associate at M&B is here, and Jeremy Zizmor, founder of Assurance Family Partners. They're here to inform and answer your questions and answer questions I had while we were putting this all together. So a few housekeeping items. Use the question panel to write in any questions or concerns that come up, and we'll do our best to answer them in real time, and if not, we'll follow up afterwards. And for any reason, if you need to jump off, we are recording the session, and that's usually available within a week of the webinar. So with that, and there's our pictures, so you can associate the voices with the face. This is basically what we're going to be going over. An introduction. Sarah's going to start off. We're going to go through an overview of these crucial 25 documents, and then break it down into the non-legal documents needed, then the legal documents that you need, some more Q&A, and then just resources at the end. So with that, Sarah, I will let you take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know it's a busy time of year. So Jeremy and I actually met because we both work with families, particularly seniors. I'm an estate planning attorney, so I work on the big pictures of families getting their affairs in order, and Jeremy works with families on more of the day-to-day challenges in terms of getting bills paid, finances organized. And recently, Jeremy had introduced me to this concept of what he calls a family playbook, which would be a binder where families can keep all of these important documents and information in one place, and it's really easily accessible to other family members. And certainly being on the other side of things during a family crisis, where there's been a hospitalization or even a passing of a loved one, I can see so much value in this. I would love for my clients to have something like this to make that process, so they can focus on their loved one and not be, chasing around these documents that they don't have. So, and I think also there's a lot of value just in that process of getting the documents together, because it can open up these conversations with your family. So I know the holidays are coming up. A lot of times people are going to be seeing family members that they haven't seen in a long time, and this is a great way, having this checklist to sort of to start those conversations. So this is just sort of some relevant statistic that 89% of Americans think that doctors should discuss end-of-life care with their patients. 90% of people say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, but these conversations, as you can see, just really aren't happening. So, so going along with this idea of starting these conversations, getting these documents in order, we realize it is a hard thing to do. It's not necessarily what you want to do all of your holiday time off, but it has certainly a lot of value, as I mentioned. So with that said, I will turn it over to Jeremy to talk a little bit about these 25 documents.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Pleasure to be with all of you, wherever time zone or time it is for you. These are the big 25, and they break out into 6 categories: healthcare, proof of ownership, life insurance and retirement, bank accounts, essentials, marriage and divorce. I'm not going to read all of them. We're going to get into detail about them, both from a non-legal and legal perspective, as we talk through the presentation.
So where should we begin? Jeremy, tell us here. It's a little daunting.
Well, that's a great question. So let's just say that the headline is that we really want to do this because the financial consequences of failing to keep our documents in order can be significant. According to the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators, state treasurers are currently holding almost $33 billion of our money in unclaimed bank accounts and other assets. And I'm sure most people would have that for themselves rather than give it to the state. So there are tools that can help you get started. And I think it really depends if you're what we call a DIY or a do-it-yourselfer or not. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer, there are many online tools available to identify, organize, and store important documents in one place. Some are more robust than others. In fact, some attorneys, financial planners, and others give these away to help you get your stuff together. What's most important, though, is the format is not important. The content is. So make sure whatever you're using, it's accessible and legible, because chances are somebody else besides the person who put it together has to read it. So a couple quick online resources I'll just call out. One is Estate Map. Another is Everplans. A third one is GYST, which stands for Get Your Stuff Together. And the last is The Torch. Now, if you're like, I would say the 99% of us who are not DIYers, financial organizers, which is something that I do in my financial organizing and bookkeeping business, they should have this as part of their service offering. And they'll do this for you, and they'll go through it, and they'll leave you with two things: a hard copy binder that is complete, and also a digital form binder that is not at risk of loss or theft or fire. But one suggestion would be consider working the process with a trusted friend, because sometimes family can have a self-interest, so an impartial person might be best.
Interesting. Great.
Okay, so again, there's a lot here. If I don't have time, or it seems daunting, or I can't kind of figure it out, what should I prioritize here?
Sure. So that list that we saw on the previous slide, we had to bring it down to a really small font so we could fit all 25
It's true.
onto the slides. So I would say let's focus on things that are more critical than others. I would say start with what you know best, which is yourself, and start to document a summary of yourself, the information that somebody else would need most often. So these key pieces of information about the spouses and the children of the parents might be your name, maiden names, mailing address, phone numbers, emails, social security numbers, license numbers, date of birth, places of birth, citizenship, marital status, veteran, if you served, are you currently receiving those benefits, religious affiliation, allergies.
And I was just going to jump in to say, I think often if you've worked with a financial advisor or an estate planning attorney in the past, they'll often have a questionnaire, which you might either have a copy of, or even if it's not recent, that's also probably a good jumping off point. Definitely.
Never pays to recreate the wheel, right?
Right, exactly, right. But I'm sure some of these resources as well that you mentioned probably have these types of forms.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
Great.
Another important place to start would be document location. So when I complete this with clients, we really focus on where we have to tell somebody where they can find a document. So it's a master file index of the crucial documents you should have. And so we don't necessarily want to take every document and stuff it in a binder. It's just as equally beneficial if we can just point to where it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Family information. So this section documents family history. It includes your children, their children, any previous marriages. Your children are the people who generally need to be contacted in the event of health or life issues. So it's important. And in the event of estate issues, the information contained here will be very helpful as well. Mm-hmm. And then the last place is not surprising. It's the case of emergency section, right? So intended for you to store your critical documents that may be needed in the event of an emergency. Many forms are state specific. If you need a certain form, a good place to look is eldercare.gov. It's a public service of the U.S. Administration on Aging, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So some of the documents to have for your in case of emergency should at least include a quick reference of who to contact in case of emergency, your blood type, and any key prescriptions, allergies, or medical conditions you have, a copy of your picture ID, like your driver's license, a copy of your health insurance cards, and don't forget to include your long-term care insurance card or identification, advanced health care directive, your MOLST form, power of attorney for financial matters, healthcare proxy for health matters, and keeping a copy of your travel insurance policy while you're on a trip.
Great.
You are the most organized person I know.
So let's go into some of the non-legal documents. We're not going to talk about each of these independently, but I will give you some bullets about each of the subjects. So let's start with proof of ownership. So the headline here is you want to keep your documentation of housing and land ownership, cemetery plots, vehicles, stock certificates, and savings bonds, any partnership or corporate operating agreements, and a list of brokerage and escrow mortgage accounts. The reason being is if you don't tell your family that you own such assets, there is a good chance they never will find out.
Right, and I can say from experience that we have that situation often where it turns out that 5 years later a family member finds out that there were assets like a brokerage account or stock that they just never knew about. So and I just wanted to clarify on this point. So you say things when you reference brokerage accounts, for example. Does somebody need to be keeping 20 years of statements for the brokerage account? What's the important documents to have?
So that could be a conversation on its own. But,
right.
But if we just want to talk specifically brokerage accounts, we want to keep the statements as long as we're holding the securities.
Okay. Okay, great.
But if we don't feel like playing detective, that's why we want to itemize everything for our family, because you said this is real life where 5 years later.
Right, and I guess my thought was just that it would be sort of the most important thing is just having that information that is on the statement as opposed to having every single statement from the past 10 or 20 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great.
I will say make the most recent 3 years of tax returns available too, because tax returns can be a very helpful detective's aid, because looking at last year's returns offers a snapshot of what assets we should be looking for this year. And
Right.
it's also going to help personal representatives file a final income tax and estate return, if necessary, a revocable trust return. Proof of loans and debts owed. This is really important that we file these so that they're included as assets in somebody's estate. And similarly, we want to keep a list of any debts you owe to avoid surprising our families.
Right.
We can move on to life insurance and retirement. So talking about life insurance, did you know that insurers are not required to take steps to determine if a policyholder is still alive, but instead pay a claim when the beneficiaries come forward? So if somebody doesn't know about a life insurance policy, these insurers are not going to advertise it.
Right, and I also recently realized that one of the important things would be if somebody hasn't passed, but they're, for example, in the hospital, and you want to make sure that the premiums keep getting paid, because we've actually had a situation where somebody was hospitalized, so the premiums didn't get paid, and after making 10 years of payments on the life insurance, it never got paid out, because they can actually deny it based on that, even though the person was. So another example of how this could be so valuable just when someone goes into the hospital, for somebody to easily be able to look to take over your affairs while you're there.
So true, Sarah. I wish that story was an anomaly, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate when you've been paying for so long and just to lose it in one shot like that.
Right.
Copies of life insurance policies are among the most important documents for your family to have, and families need to know all the specifics around it so that that they can make sure that they can get the insurance-related payments. About just combining all the other sort of asset accounts, it's important to draw up a list And did you know an IRA is considered dormant or unclaimed if no withdrawal has been made by age 70 and a half? So it's really important that we're aware of those.
Great.
Let's talk about bank accounts just for a second. Make sure we're not forgetting about the debit cards and the PINs.
I'd also add too, just to make sure that you have a clear list of the titling of accounts too, which is, we'll have it usually on a statement, but just having the bank account information, because that's another thing that's very important, especially if you're going to, if somebody else is going to an attorney or something to review your affairs. It's important to know how everything's titled, how the beneficiaries are set up.
Yep.
So that would be another important piece.
Absolutely. Make sure the beneficiaries on all those accounts are kept up to date. That is a key takeaway. You're right. And just to keep moving, I will say safe deposit box. Any of them that you own, register your spouse or child's name with the bank so that they can get access to the safe deposit box as well. And just finishing up this slide with marriage and divorce, ensure that your spouse knows where you have stored your marriage license. Otherwise, you're going to send that surviving spouse on quite a job, especially if you didn't get married in the state that you're currently living in. You have to reach back out to that state. So make sure also for divorced people that they leave behind the divorce judgment and decree, or if the case was settled without going to court, the stipulation agreement or property settlement agreement.
Great. Thank you.
Find my marriage license. All right. So, who needs to do this? Seemingly, I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it.
Well, the simple answer is everyone should have this for their immediate family, even if you're single. Some people will sit with aging parents and complete the process for them. They'll be the ones eventually handling their parents' affairs, so it's in both of their interest to have things clear and in order. The process facilitates a communication exchange that has oftentimes been uncomfortable to start, just like what you talked about in the beginning. So some of the information collected is sensitive and private, and we all need to be aware of privacy and identity theft issues, especially with in-home service providers and, sadly, even some misguided relatives. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Okay, so what if I run into issues of obtainment? I'm trying to get all these documents together, and there's just red tape everywhere. What do I do next instead of give up?
I think the most direct is reach out to an estate attorney like Sarah, or a financial organizer like myself, and our experience should help resolve some of those open issues.
Yeah, and often it's really, we can, very easily point you in the right direction because we've dealt with the issue, many times of people coming and needing to get a copy of a document, or, whether it's contacting a life insurance company, we can certainly point you the way to go. So hopefully that won't hold up the process and you can keep moving.
Got it.
Great.
So digital, right? This is huge now. How does this factor into everything?
Well, I think I would defer and Sarah and get your input on the digital world as far as document collection.
Sure. Well, so one of the things that we talked about before was in terms of digital assets and passwords and all of these things that before might have not been a big part of administering somebody's estate, or even if they are to become incapacitated and somebody needs to access information, all of a sudden a lot of that now is online. So one really important thing when you are going through your documents, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, is just reviewing your powers of attorney, reviewing your will to make sure that it has that updated language that allows your agent or your personal representative to access those accounts. Because, I have seen situations where I just had this recent situation, someone's in the hospital and their children are trying to access an account online, and the power of attorney doesn't have that specific language allowing for them to access online accounts. And unfortunately, a lot of the investment institutions, it's much easier for them to say no than to say yes. So, so definitely, if you haven't done a power of attorney in the last 5 or 10 years, that might be something that when you are putting this documentation to review.
Right. Only other thing I would add is anything of importance, whether in a hard copy, you should have a digital location redundancy. So, and more than one trusted person should know the location and password to obtain it, just like you were talking about for the power of attorney.
Great.
So how long is this process going to take? Can I do it over the holidays?
I'll answer it like a lawyer. It depends. So it's not a surprise. The creation of the legal documents are probably what's going to take the longest because there's decisions to be made, really important decisions. And so they have the longest lead times. When it comes to the non-legal side, and it's a lot of collection of existing, that can be between 5 and 10 hours to complete enough of the document collection and information documentation. A lot of it is going to depend upon your stage in life, how many people are in the family, and how organized is the source information. Really depends on the situation somebody's walking into. And because life changes, it requires probably an annual review just to make sure that we're keeping things current.
Right. And I think it's one of those things, too, is that even when you're starting it, even if you start to gather these things, start to have some of those conversations, there's still so much value in doing that. So I don't think that, I think it is one of the situations that you are deferred or put off by, scared away because of the amount. I think that it still helps to just do something rather than nothing.
Okay, so I think we talked about this too, but who should have copies of all these documents?
Okay, so you've done something. Now you've got some sort of deliverable, your work product. You're really happy. You got to tell somebody about it, or else it's like it never happened, because they have to be able to find it. So I advise keeping it in an accessible yet not real obvious place, because it's got to be something that you're going to remember, but you also don't want it strewn about where it becomes, very obvious. Tell at least 4 key people in your life where the binder is located so they can get to it if needed. So definitely children, spouse, if you're a parent, your children, if you have parents, tell them. And one of them should definitely be your attorney.
And I was just going to also make as another suggestion, something that we've done with our clients is often they will have, they'll tell the attorney where all this important information is, or give them copies of documents, and we can scan it into our electronic file. And then all they have to do is tell the family members, all this information is with my attorney. So then if they can tell all of those people, so then they don't worry about really giving out all that information to all those people or giving out the location, because it's with the firm, it's all secure, and then what those people just need to know is that if something happens, we need to call Margolis and Bloom or whatever other attorney or firm it is.
Got it.
Great.
Okay, so now I think, Sarah, this is your turn to dive into these, deeper legal documents and
Sure.
The longer process of this.
Great, and I will say that it is the process. It can be, and I think it could be anywhere on the. If somebody is motivated and they know what they want, it can be actually a relatively short process of getting the documents done. I think that the process usually takes longer just because they're hard decisions to make, things that people don't want to talk about, and they put off, coming in to sign things and put up making those decisions. But in terms of these specific documents, I always tell people, of course, the power of attorney, healthcare proxy, those are the 2 most important documents, more important than the will or the trust, because those are the documents where if something happens to you, if you're in the hospital, if there's an accident or a crisis, that somebody can easily be immediately has that authority to make that healthcare decision for you, to be able to access your bank accounts to pay for medical expenses, to pay bills, to pay your insurance premiums, to make sure the real estate's being taken care of, all of those very important things. So, actually I have a checklist which I'll have you post with the online and with the webinar, but some things to just go over when you're reviewing your power of attorney and your healthcare proxy. You're putting them in the binder. It's a good thing just to also just take a look at them. Are they up to date? Like I said before, I mentioned some concerns about older powers of attorney. Do you have alternate agents? With the power of attorney, it's also really important to say, do you have the original or do you just have copies? Because for some certain transactions, like transferring real estate, you're going to need the original document. And also, even if a document is, all the information is correct, if it is more than 10 years old, some financial institutions actually will be unwilling to accept them. So those are some of the important things to think about when you're reviewing these documents. The other two documents, as I said, will, again, very important to have the original, or at least know where the original is. We certainly have lots of families that come to us and they can't find the original will. They have a copy and they don't know where the original is. Trust documents is not as important to have originals, but again, it's important to have the amendments, you know, if it's a realty trust, the schedule of beneficiaries, really important to pull all of that together. So
I think you
so I think I talked about that in terms of the copies, and then also sort of already talked a little bit about how often someone should be updating or reviewing their estate planning documents, because I did mention that, at least for the powers of attorney, often if those are more than 10 years old, or if they're even a few years old but they don't have that updated language for the digital assets, it might very much be worth it to review and update those. But in general, we say, you know, review your estate plan, try to do it about every 5 years, which can be ambitious for some people, but also, especially if you've had any sort of major life event like having children or a divorce or anything that would be a big move, purchase of new real estate, those would all be reasons to touch base with your estate planning attorney.
Okay, so what happens if we don't have these documents in place?
Sure. So, so what happens is, so first of all, as I mentioned, if something were to happen to you, some of the consequences would be that someone wouldn't be able to immediately be making those healthcare decisions or immediately accessing your real estate or your financial accounts. The alternative, what ends up usually happening is that the family has to go to court to obtain what's called a guardianship or conservatorship over that adult person if they're incapacitated and unable at that point to make their own decisions. So certainly would recommend against going through that process if at all possible. It's I go through it with clients and it's expensive and stressful and time consuming. And often, you know, family members have different ideas about what is best for a person. I know that it can be hard, especially for somebody that has multiple children, to potentially be making a decision between them in terms of who's going to be making the healthcare decisions or the financial decisions. But what I always tell people is that even though it's a tough decision for you to make, it's not a decision that you want a judge to make. So that's some of the things that we want to avoid.
So yeah, what about going into the pros and cons of going back to that DIY, you know, mentality? If I could do something with LegalZoom, make it fast, cheap, you know,
sure.
Get it done, is that, where do I make the determination of when I need an attorney versus me being able to do it myself?
Sure, so that's a good question, and I think that LegalZoom is a valuable tool, and certainly for some people that have a really simple situation, LegalZoom might be a good tool for them. The problem that I see most in my practice is that often people think they have a simple situation or they think it's straightforward, and it turns out that it's not, and that they actually there could have been a lot of value in having even just a very short conversation with an attorney. That conversation just being like, actually, that's not the document that you need this document, or actually, the example that I was giving to you recently was that somebody set up a trust, and even though they did a very good job, LegalZoom did a very good job of helping them to create that trust, they didn't realize that they had to fund the trust and had to set up a will that poured over into the trust, and all these other steps. So the trust actually ended up being, completely worthless in terms of there was nothing in it. It had, no effect over that person's assets. So that's the problem that I see with LegalZoom. I often have people come to say, how much is a power of attorney or how much is a will, that single document, and it's not the single document that when you go to an estate plan attorney that you're looking for. It's the advice and the guidance that they're giving you.
Okay, so with that, what are some of the next best steps?
So I would say, I think, the next best step, I would say, is any step. I certainly, now that this is certainly making me think that I need to start, working on pulling some of this together for my family members. And like it says here, when you do have questions, you do run into roadblocks, consult an attorney, for financial organizer. They're people that can not only answer questions, they can help you and also help to keep the momentum, I think, as well. I think that is one of the things that's hardest to do about it, is to get it done. But I think taking that first step is really the hardest part.
And my addition would be, now that you know what the 25 documents are, and you know that there's resources available like binders, which are pre-templatized either through online or through the work of a financial organizer, follow the process. It's already been laid out, so just walk the steps and reach out to the resources in your life, like the estate planning attorneys, when you hit snags, and they can walk you through that.
Great, good. So I think now it's time for questions. I do want to say thank you to both of you guys, Sarah and Jeremy. So I know the numbers do sound like a lot. 25 is a lot, but it's actually seemingly manageable once I break it down into small steps. So I think this is what my holiday project is going to be as well. And right now, so let's take a look and see with the questions. We do have time for some, but and if we don't get to them, we will follow back up. And I know also you will get an email with the recording, and Sarah's going to give me the checklist that she had. So we'll include that in the email, so look out for that. The video will be on YouTube. It's going to be on our website. Maybe it'll be on Jeremy's website, I'm not sure. And
definitely.
Yeah, we have it on LinkedIn and all of those places too. So let me take a look and see what we've got here. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Okay. Yes, we will be. Oh, we won't have a copy of the slides, but we will have the video. That was one of the questions. Will you be providing a copy of the slides? No, but you'll have the video to look at, and you'll have the checklist.
And the recording.
And the video recording. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next one here. It will let me. Okay, hold on a second, guys. Sorry. Always some kind of technical difficulty. Here. What are considerations for who should be the person? For who
should be the person to have,
or people to have this knowledge and responsibility?
So I think we talked about that a little bit in terms of obviously being somebody trusted. It's a lot of private information, and then also some of those alternatives in terms of if you are a person that doesn't really, have people in your life that you necessarily want them to have access to all the information. For example, giving that information to an attorney or a financial organizer or someone, and then having, then telling other people in your life, all that information is with that person in the event of an emergency.
The beginning of that question was for people with no children or younger relatives. I'm sorry about that. This isn't letting us look at too much of this here, so I think it's not really letting me get into any of the questions. Okay. So we do get a copy of the questions, and we'll know who they come from, so we will follow back up with emails on that if there's anything that we didn't get to, because I'm sorry that I'm having trouble reading them. There's the issue with GoToWebinar. So we will work on that. So with that, I think if you do have additional questions that you can think of, you can continue the conversation.
Right, and I think we have our contact information right there. Here's
our contact information. So for Sarah and for Jeremy, maybe take a quick screenshot of this so you can have it. Either sh@margolis.com or jeremy@assuranceFamilyPartners.com. And you can reach directly out to them if anything comes up in your 25 document quest. So with that, thank you everyone. Hope everyone has a wonderful holiday, and thank you to Sarah and Jeremy.
Thank you.